Light is on. Capture. Give him a hand. Today on the talk show, THR 216, we are to. Oh, love the shades back there. Let's check. All of us check our hair. That's got it. There we go. Morgan looking good. Catherine looking good. Okay. Today on the show, we want Sharmella Duval. Look back here. Over here, please. We're talking about the Tempest we saw so far, and already we saw a bunch of elements that were interesting to me at least, maybe not you. It takes place in this old mansion, very postmodern done. The Miranda, instead of being a virginal young 14-year-old, she looks like she was around the block a little bit, you know. She's an older Miranda. So the director's making these decisions to push and pull the interpretation of Shakespeare. The director is Derek Jarman, passed away in the 90s, famous English director, movie director of the play. The movie is The Tempest, which we're seeing. I like this version best of all the versions out there because it's dark and spooky. Morgan, how was it dark and spooky to you? Are we even seeing it? We are seeing it.
I felt like when I was watching it, I couldn't really see anything because it
was literally dark, right?
Yeah, it was literally really
You just
dark.
hear the voices come up. Yeah, Professor, it was in Braille, as a matter of fact. It was so dark. Muhammad, what? It's kind of kinky, right? So far, spooky, kinky. What do we call it? What do you kids call that now? It's steampunk, right? We don't call it that. No, it wasn't steampunk. It was kind of like in the late 70s, there's kind of this neo-punky attitude. Well, back then it was punk. Kind of like punk-ish sort of flavor to the whole piece. Contemporary dress. Muhammad, what do you feel the overall texture of the piece?
Like she said, it's like dark in literally, and then dark in its idea of portraying
of humanity, yeah. Right? Caliban's like, would you want that guy for a friend, Jithan? Hell no. Weird guy, right?
Yeah, money. You have a lot of money.
Did Caliban have money?
Isn't he a slave?
Yeah, and here's another thing. Shanta, it's a very, very oft interpreted character because Caliban means cannibal. Lids down, guys. Matt, Jeremy, lids down. Monofocus. Monofocus for once, like a human being. Jeremy, down. Good. Bad for terms of a study of imperialism, colonialism, because it was supposed that Caliban was either a Native American Indian or African American taken to Caribbean. Weigh in on that, Matt. Weigh in on that. What do you portrayal do you think Shakespeare might have intended, or is this open?
As far as like the two options that you...
It's very non-PC, right? Politically correct to have Caliban be this libidinous, violent, rapacious...
Well, that's part of the time, though. Like it's now politically incorrect, but I guess in the setting.
Yeah, and the odds of him being African American are like incredibly small because there were not very many black people in America
at the time in 1600.
Yeah, so it would have been really weird.
Well, they just started the slave trade, but Jeremy, what do you think about this whole thing of Prospero enslaving Caliban? Well, you say Ariel was enslaved also, but...
Yeah, I mean, they explain it in the story as originally he was his friend and like Caliban helped him out and they were a partnership, and Caliban tried to rape his daughter, so that was why he enslaved him, which kind of makes sense, because you wouldn't want to like treat him nicely if he tried to rape your daughter and continues to talk about how he intends to one day rape your daughter.
Ultimately. Again.
But I mean, you could also then say that it fits into stereotypes of black people and native people at the time, which is that they would be libidinous and dangerous. Yeah,
and it was also an ambiguous thing. They saw the Native Americans as being these liberated, noble savages, and a lot of people, the Jonestown colony and the Rona colony, they disappeared into the woods with them. They had enough of this failure of European civilization to eke out a living in this so-called raw continent, so they disappeared with the Native Americans. What, Sundus, what, weigh in on just, okay, because I'll show two other plays. Merchant of Venice, these young yuppie Venetian people actually abuse Shylock. People have said that Merchant of Venice is an anti-Semitic piece because it doesn't paint Jews in a very good light. At the end, these young people who make the wager actually renege on their wager and brutally treat. He's the one who's getting a pound of flesh cut out of him. Othello, another African, is portrayed as a jealous Islamic individual who they've contracted to fight wars, and Iago set him up. Should we put on our modern glasses on all of these pieces, and is this open for kind of post-colonial interpretation? Sundus.
I mean, I guess the way that didn't they shoot it with the mindset back then? It's not the way that they thought about it now.
We live in a more global time. It's the beginning of a really global society, even though China and India had been sailing about and globalizing in their sense. This was the beginning of European globalization. The Europeans are far behind the game according to China and India at this point.
We have to look at it with our modern glasses. We don't. I mean, our history classes only tell us so much. You know.
It's usually the dominant line. Sometimes when you talk about a liberal democracy, still that comes out racist and.
Yeah. Our history classes stop at Vietnam.
Yeah.
Do they? Did your high school class stop at Vietnam? Oh my God. No? What did they teach you about Vietnam, Teresa?
I'll say World War II.
Yeah, majorly. Like, the last one, that little war that only ended 2 years ago, it's Vietnam Redo. Same thing. And I couldn't believe, I was out there protesting. I was in the streets. I was whatever. I said, you can't do it. Can't happen. This is because I didn't live through Vietnam. I was a kid in Vietnam, and it's like, can't happen. This is wrong policy. Not even mostly ethically, but even economically, it's bad. The military people take most of the money from all their new inventions and gadgets to kill babies, and our economy plummets down. So you heard my opinion of that. But why did your history book stop with Vietnam, Catherine? Vietnam War.
I don't think my high school even got that far.
Yeah, I would say World War
To be
II, but
honest.
I got generous.
Why was World War II clear? And look at the thing. We Americans have not won a war since World War II. Really?
On our own.
It seemed like
What?
On our own.
On our own at all. Korea, stalemate. Vietnam, we lost. Iraq, super stalemate.
What about the Gulf War?
it was a world.
That was, why did we fight it again then?
I'm not saying why.
It was kind of a world thing. It wasn't like one country. It was like major nations.
It was more of a consensus.
Yeah.
But what more interesting, like okay, Hitler and Mussolini lost the war, and the Japanese general, Toho, they all got killed. Toho was executed.
Shot himself.
Mussolini was killed by the partisans.
Hitler.
Shot and burned himself in his bunker.
His wife.
And Eva Braun. But Eric, if they had won, our side would have been tried as war criminals, right? Hiroshima, firebombing, all of that stuff. It's just in this history written by the winners, but is that why Vietnam isn't in the history books you studied in high school?
I think so, yeah. It's definitely written by the winners.
But we never won that one. So it's conveniently omitted.
That's why it's hidden.
What benefit do you guys see? How many had a parent or uncle in Vietnam War? Your dad? Your granddad was in Vietnam. Did he tell you stories about it?
I just need to,
What was he?
Make folders check for
The name.
He was in it. Did he have to take one of those boats up the river?
Yeah, nothing really. Like, wasn't too involved.
He was on the big boats. Usually a guy says, oh, I'll join the Navy and I'll be out of this, and suddenly they find themselves on a little speedboat going up the Mekong, just like in the movies. That's what happened to Carrie. Carrie was on one of those speedboats in the I can't. What?
The speedboats?
Oh, they had the lowest rate of survival of anything in the whole thing. Opinions on this, Jeremy? No, Brenny. History books. Why American history books omit the nasty parts, the muddy parts, the ambiguous parts, even the evil parts?
Well, because you're teaching the kids, and that's
You want kids to have hope. You don't want to expose the kids to
I
too
think
much.
it's with every country. No country teaches their kids that their country messed up somewhere.
I speak. We don't have any here. I have some Japanese students. I ask them, do you learn the history of what you guys did to Korea? No. What happened?
Nobody.
It's like some pretty nasty. Like, first of all, you took about 2 million women as impounded prostitutes. How would you like that to happen in your culture? It's not saying America did any better, but that was something they don't. Korea constantly wants them to say, admit that in your officially or in your history books. Duval, what else is behind this idea of Caliban as a cannibal, slave, Native American, African American, and our view of history now?
I mean, first of all, I still understand why would Prospero keep Caliban around if he was trying to rape his daughter. Right?
Do you think he should put a cap in his head?
Yeah, definitely.
Or that's not the part of the body you usually say you put the cap in.
But yeah,
But you'd cap him down at the beach, right?
yeah, exactly.
And who's going to stop him? Sorry, bud. Boom.
He has nobody else to talk to.
Except for his
He has
daughter,
nobody else to do
Ariel.
anything. Like, you
And Ariel, the ethereal Ariel. Or Sean, what's a more radical theory? Behind, hang with us, bud. What's the more radical theory behind, and relate this to Vietnam? I'm asking all you guys to make the stretch. Make the stretch intellectually. What's the other theory behind Caliban and Prospero? I said it in class a couple, maybe it was the other class. Prospero is Caliban.
his subconscious or something.
They did a movie called Forbidden Planet. That's exactly the way they played it. It's creepier than hell, man.
So is he keeping Caliban around to like keep himself sane?
It's like we studied Freud in this class. That's his libido. That's his id. Ariel's his super ego, and his, as if those you study psychology, Prospero, that's his ego. That's what everyone's seeing. But he's got these two. He's nuts. First of all, he's been too bookish, and his brother said, "You ain't fit to rule. You like books too much. Out of here." You know, he's barely saved. He's sent to an island, right? Exile. He should be happy in their secret. He might even be happy on the island, right?
So he's like fighting himself to rape his daughter?
He's got a young pubescent daughter, and that's the only soul on the island. It gets into the sick realm. They play it in the movie a little bit that way. Shakespeare touches many aspects of the human psyche, and he's not afraid to go there. In this idea that shouldn't Prospero be happy? I saw this play when I was young. I said, the dude is a nerd. He loves his books. He should be the happiest guy on earth on this island, except one thing. Matt, what is that?
I have no idea.
You saw the play, right? His daughter. And his daughter, you biologists, has his DNA, right? That should be his legacy, right? Make sure she procreates. But he is the only one on the island with a time bomb. And it's the time bomb of both legacies, DNA, spreading your DNA, getting out there. That's what we said all about. And this Caliban and this Ariel are like these. Remember those old cartoons where you have angel, devil on your shoulders? Ta-da! What? Let's see. Eric, lead us into own this. Take this theory a little bit further.
Well, I think like what you're saying, it's like the end game for him is he's just gonna die, and his daughter's eventually just gonna die, and he has no legacy or anything like that. Like that's his end game, I guess. That's what
He's also practically rationally facing an end game. It's like, I'm stuck on this island. He's woken up from his books and said, I've been so self-indulgent. This daughter of mine is this legacy. We never quite learn what happened to Mrs. Prospero. which I always like when there's a missing woman in Shakespeare. There's always usually kind of a reason you can play with, and then it's gone. What? As a kid, I'm fascinated with Vietnam era literature. I gobble it up. Read a great book called Dispatches. It was an award-winning book all about Vietnam. As a kid, I saw and read, and I read these specials on Vietnam about the My Lai massacres, which is that same thing. Anyone heard about these? Because you don't study in college. Nick, what do you know about these things?
That the American lieutenant, his name was Kelly, executed like a whole village of Vietnam.
About 1,000 men, women, children liquidated. It was they ran mayhem. But I read up to that, and you think the good farm boys next to you, good American boys, suddenly in this context, and it happened in Fallujah too. I had a student here who was at Fallujah. It was read. They were constantly getting sniped by the Viet Cong, and they were frustrated beyond. They could not see the enemy for like a whole week, and their whole platoon was dropping away, scared, paranoid, angry. Everything that was brought to a boil, like good American boys. Then suddenly the order was given: find the Cong, eliminate. We can't tell who the Cong is. And then the order came over: eliminate the whole thing, which meant every man, woman, and child. And they went amok. What, Jeremy, relating this to Caliban, the Caliban side of Prospero, what maybe was in those American boys at that point? Atrocities.
Well, they probably were frustrated and also paranoid. Like you said.
Scared, frustrated, angry, all these emotions at once.
Right, but then there's also the fact
What?
that there's also the fact
Testosterone.
that they were following orders, and that there's a long-standing like psychological thing that when you are told by someone in a position of authority, especially when you are a military person who has been to some degree brainwashed to follow orders without questioning them, that you will do things that are
Right.
awful because you are supposed to, like, in your brain, this person in authority told you.
There's actually 2 helicopter pilots who were flying over this, couldn't believe what they were seeing. They were landing and helping people helping villagers get on the helicopters. The guys were totally amok. It was like they weren't even seeing. They're like Maenads in the Bacchae. They could not even see the enemy, and there were everything was at a boil. They snapped, and it was a horrific thing. Could you see, any of you, Prospero snapping? Yes? One night, his daughter's there, and he's like, this is society. This is my society. She's my... And what would we say? And Shakespeare always puts his characters on the verge of snapping, to a degree. What would be an alternative ending to the Tempest, Morgan, if Prospero hadn't luckily orchestrated all the other, his revenge, his acceptance, his forgiveness of Gonzalo Antonio, and so forth?
I don't know. I have no idea.
You do know.
What? I don't know who those people are, other than the 2 main characters.
Well, Prospero has a daughter. Opinion, Catherine.
I didn't see who those people were either.
No, yeah, Brendan.
Something creepy enough with his daughter, whereas like maybe like sexual.
Yeah, it could have been ugly. All the books in the world couldn't have stopped it.
Modern times, but not Shakespeare's.
You're actually right on that. The incest has been this current all through most societies, and what's the taboo against incest? Because we have royal princes and princesses marrying each
I
other.
was about to say that.
What?
The royal family.
Yeah, we got brothers and sisters
found
marrying
the
it.
taboo
I mean,
later
they think
on.
Queen Elizabeth was actually raped by her father, right?
I don't know about that.
No, there's a couple of all the royal families have these extremely kinky things going on within to keep the bloodline within. But Shanta, how do we look at that now?
No.
Yeah.
As in, you're supposed to be protecting your child, not...
And you're supposedly extending your DNA and your bloodline, right?
Yeah.
So this is just not couth, right? It's savage, right? So we have the binary of Caliban's supposed to be the savage guy, But right on the verge, Prospero is experiencing that same savageness on one level, or we could see it as such. Let's give him a hand.